Hello, my name is Dillon. So the form I found for this week was from the True North Christian Counseling Center. So the form I looked at provides some basic information about the counseling agency, that the counselors that are employed by the agency have a God-based understanding of people. The informed consent form does not spend a great deal amount of time discussing information about each counselor. Rather, it does include a clause that the client can discuss the background of their counselor with that specific counselor. The next section of the form I looked at talks about confidentiality. So the form broadly states that typical occurrences for confidentiality are governed by HIPAA, and they require certain legal forms, HIPAA does, to clear the counselor to provide information to others. From there, the form outlines a few specific instances where HIPAA-approved forms are not required. Instances such as consultation, for the counselor to seek consultation with another professional to get their opinion on a matter. Government requirements are another example of that. The confidentiality notice I mentioned, I read, informed consent form, does mention that a court order could require the counselor to turn over information to the court. The counseling center did include a clause that should any suits be filed in court against the center, client information could be shared with the attorney if it has an impact on the defense for the counseling center. Another instance it did bring up is that client signature acknowledging such confidentiality waiver would be for verification of treatment. It mentions specifically workers' compensation that may request verification of treatment to award funding, or if the client is looking to be compensated by insurance, that the insurance company could also possibly require some verification of treatment and diagnosis before they award any funds. The next section of the document outlines 3 specific instances where the counseling firm indicates that they're required by law to act even without client approval. And really all 3 boil down to making sure that there's no direct harm that's going to come to the client or to anyone else for that matter. They boil down to if it's made known that the client is expressing violent behavior toward themselves or toward anyone else, and the counselor believes that they have the capacity to carry out such threats, that the counselor would need to reveal some client information to the person the client is making the threats against, or maybe the police, to ensure client well-being. It also mentioned things like making sure that there was no violation of any DHS policies going on within the relationship, such as the client was not endangering children or abusing other adults that would require them to call the Department of Human Services to check on that situation. Within the next section of the form that I viewed, it's briefly discussed about billing. The informed consent form, the informed consent form that I viewed does state that the counseling center would appreciate 24 hours notice of a canceled appointment. If an appointment is canceled without 24 hours notice, that a late fee of $25 would be assessed. The informed consent form also suggests that in case of emergencies, clinical emergencies, that the client could reach out to the counselor via telephone, and the counselor would return the client's call. And if the call went beyond 10 minutes, that a full hour would be assessed, a full hourly rate would be assessed to the client. However, the form does fall a little bit short here in that it does not discuss what specific fees for billing are beyond the cancellation fee. So looking at that form and comparing it to the ACA Code of Ethics, the form is pretty straightforward. Everything mentioned in the ACA Code of Ethics, the 2014 iteration of that, is for the most part included in the informed consent form that I viewed. It does indicate the clients have the right to choose to continue or not continue with the counseling relationship or not. It does indicate that there may be times that information pertaining to the client or the client's file may need to be shared with others. It provides that HIPAA requires some legal forms to do so. And it does state that outside of the specific occurrences listed in the informed consent form, that any other request for client information would have to be accompanied by a HIPAA form. It does indicate, cultural sensitivity. The form seems to be fairly straightforward with fairly easy to read language, so much so that just through a Google search and downloading of the form, I'm able to read the form and don't need any in-depth vocabulary to really understand the form and what it's saying. It doesn't really, though, give any indication about those who are unable to give consent, minors or adults who are incapacitated, not being able to give consent to treatment. So that would be one thing that I would like to see in this form moving forward, is some sort of notice given to that. It does, however, mention in the signature section, within a parentheses by the signature line, that if the person signing the form or the person who would sign the form is a minor, that the legal guardian or the parent of the minor would have to sign the form. The only thing, according to the ACA, credits that I did not, the ACA ethics code that I didn't see in this form, was any indication about mandated clients. Clients who were mandated by the court to come see us, and they also have a right of refusal to service. They can choose to refuse to be seen. The ACA does go on to state that counselors should, at that point, proceed to engage with the client as to what the potential consequences of refusal are. But this form doesn't give any indication of that. I think as a client, if I were to receive this form in a counseling setting, I'd be fairly grateful for how understanding it is, how understandable it is, the fact that I could read it and make out most of what it says. I would be a little lost, though, as to what the fees for the service actually are. I'm not seeing anything that indicates on the form specific fees for an hour session or a half-hour session. I do see what the flat rate is for canceled sessions, but nothing beyond that. So I would like to see that in there as well.